Okay, here we go. Hi, welcome to podnutz Linux for the Rest of Us, number 43. If you look real carefully, you will see that I am not Steve Cherubino. I am Larry Aldrich, known in the podnutz forums as Doc Brown. And Steve is taking a well-deserved sabbatical. So I'm going to step in and I'm going to ask the questions of our main man here. He's the man, the legend, the maven. You know him, you love him, door-to-door geek, also known as Steve McLaughlin. Good evening, Steve.
Hello, Doc.
I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to help out here on the Linux for the Rest of Us broadcast. As I said, we're up to number 43. You guys have churning these, been churning these out for 43 episodes, and let's go for at least another 43 more. What do you say?
Sounds good to me. Definitely. Um, how's everything going with you?
It's going wonderful. I'm a little bit out of focus tonight, but it's the medications I've been taking. So, as you can see, I'm a little bit fuzzy. What have you got for us this week, Steve?
Well, first, can you give our new listeners a little background to, um, to yourself, to your career?
Oh, you want to spend the whole time on me, huh? Because I could talk
Mm,
that long about
Nah, just at least a little bit. I don't expect everyone to go back through the histories of Podnuts and listen to all of them, even though they should.
Well, I'm a retired school teacher. I taught computer repair at a vocational technical center in Fishersville, Virginia for about 5 years. Health issues made me take a early retirement. But that's okay. I can now put my full attention into my computer repair business once again, which I had to kind of put to a halt when I took the teaching position. I spend my days repairing computers, working on taking care of my customers. Spend some time in the Podnutz TeamSpeak chat room. If you guys don't participate in that, you ought to look into it. And when I heard that the two Steves were looking for someone to fill in for the Linux for the Rest of Us, I said, well, let me give it a try. And they gladly took me on. So that's about all I've got to say about me. The show's not about me, though. The show's about Linux, what's going on in the world of Linux. And Mr. McLaughlin does an excellent job of week in, week out, bringing us the latest Linux news. So, Steve, over to you, my friend. What have you got for us? Hello, Steve.
Okay, looks like we lost Door. Just hang tight, Doc. That was great, though. Can you hear me, Doc?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Gonna stop the recording there. Door, you there?
I'm here.
Where did we lose you at?
I heard Doc, getting ready to basically throw it my way.
Okay, let me call you right back. Something's just up with Skype. How's your packets looking?
Fine.
I'm getting choppy video from you.
I have no updates going anywhere, no extra stuff going on.
Okay. Why don't you give it a reboot? I'll call you right back. Can you do that, or you're all set up with tabs and
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Reboot.
Okay, I'll call you right back. Or actually,
Okay.
call me when you're booted up.
Gotcha.
Cool. All right.
And Linux is better than Windows. How?
For anyone watching, we've been getting some emails. People think Door's taking it too hard on Windows.
Well, when you strongly believe in something, you got to strongly disbelieve in something.
It's true. And I don't mind that people have a problem with it as long as Door explains his viewpoint. I think would be helpful. And I think he's going to do it on this show. We'll see. That was good, though, Doc.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'm at a loss as to explain why I'm so out of focus. Usually it's nowhere near this bad.
Yeah, don't even worry about it now. It's fine. But how does it look on your end? Like sometimes I've heard people say on Skype when they're out of focus, they say it looks fine on their end. But when I say it's fuzzy, they don't know why.
Well, on the little window for showing just me,
Yeah.
it looks good. But on the big window where it's showing the feed, Steve looks really clear.
Yeah.
And sharp and in focus, but I look fuzzy.
I don't know why. Do you usually sit that position with your webcam?
Well, I can move further, see if it helps.
No. Stay where you are for today.
Okay.
Because it'll be fine for today. But I was just curious if maybe you moved your depth or distance.
No, anytime I've ever done the show with you before, I've sat about this far away.
Okay. Yeah, it's perfectly fine for today, Doc. If you want to make changes, go for it later. But all right, Dor, you with us?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for doing that.
No problem. And I did do a manual update check, which means it shouldn't do it for another 24 hours. That was the only thing that could be running in the background.
Okay. All right. So last thing we did was Doc said over to you, pretty much over to you. Let me hang on one sec here. Let me find that point. Okay. And so why don't we take it from there, Dor? Just go for it.
Now?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you, Doc. And I gotta say, most of the podnutzians come from computer repair background, including myself. I've done computer repair now for about 15 years and been into computers for nearly 30 years. So I think it's a natural progression for computer techs to expand, explore, see what else is available. And this really is nothing more than just an optional pathway people can take. And I think the goal of the show is to just try to lessen the bell curve of feeling comfortable in the Linux, if you so choose that path. The first thing I wanted to talk about real quick, Doc, was I've gotten dinged in the IRC saying I'm too mean to Linux. I've gotten an email saying I'm unfair and unjust to Mac. I've gotten emails also saying I have no idea how Windows works and I'm very mean to Windows and I'm unfair. I'll say I'm harsh on everything. I expect a lot out of my computers, and I'm going to try to be more tactful with some of my verbiage. I do agree, once in a while I have a little venom, and to be honest, most of the time it's for fun's sake. I have stated on this podcast way back, nothing I say is directly literal. A lot of it is my feelings, and I'm sorry if I offended anyone. I hear you. Trying to clean up. Don't want to make people mad. It's not good. So I thank you for the emails. I thank you for the feedback. I thank you enough for caring to send the emails. That's really the big point. With that said, the first topic I want to mention really quick, it isn't in our notes, Doc, and it's just a super quickie. I feel like Linux podcast as a whole, especially video podcast, let me rephrase that. Linux video podcasts are now going to suffer and suffer very badly, Doc.
And would that have anything to do with the folks in Redmond, Washington?
Indeed, sir. Indeed. I believe it was finalized this morning, or the hearsay is it's finalized this morning, that Skype was purchased by Microsoft for $8+ billion.
Yes, that is indeed a fact. $8.5 billion. They say it's
good, sir.
They say it's the biggest single acquisition, money-wise, that Microsoft has ever made.
Wow. And it doesn't make a dime. From everything I hear, Skype has never made money versus how much money they spend out. So That's a great business decision, I guess.
Well, we'll never figure out the marketing department at Microsoft. They must be doing something right, though, because they have such a huge footprint
Yeah.
on the industry.
Yep. And I agree wholeheartedly to anyone that tries to make a comment, I'm not a good businessman. You're exactly right. Hence why I'm still living in a single family townhouse. If I really was really good at business, I'd have a couple acres behind me. But
Well,
so
you're not a Mormon, so there's no need for you to live in a multiple family townhouse.
exactly. What I'm afraid of is that Skype, A, I know will not get updated for Linux, but B, Skype is not a true P2P voice conferencing system. If the Skype servers go completely down, no one can make any calls. So the main servers need to be up and active for this system to work. And I'm afraid they're going to rev those master servers to work better with Microsoft OSs, and then to basically leave the Linux guys behind. Maybe not intentionally. Maybe their justification will be to give a better experience for Windows users. I don't know. But to be honest, I'm afraid of what's going to happen. And the Mac guys, to be honest, should be equally afraid, because I don't think it's good for either Mac or Linux, this purchase. But it's still brand new. We're going to have to wait and see, really.
Well, I think the more paranoid among us might say that Microsoft has done this intentionally to do harm to Mac and Linux, because all of their attention would be going to support Skype for the Windows platforms. Now, that's just conjecture on my part. It all remains to be seen, but I think the rules are definitely going to change as far as Linux boxes and Mac boxes are going to happen.
Right. Yeah. And just like right now, I'm doing a little experimental thing this week. I got a little bug in my ear who's in the chat room. And whenever there's important questions that come up, he's going to ping me on them, because I'm not good at watching chat, listening, and talking at the same time. One thing he's pointing out for me, and this is Tracy Holtz from the techiegeek.com, is that the Linux client was open sourced a year ago. So hopefully that will help. But I'm still just worried about the end protocol and the servers in the middle. But, we'll just have to wait and see. There are other clients out there that do voice conferencing and do video conferencing. I don't think they do as good as a job, to be quite honest. And Skype isn't perfect. Not saying that either. So hopefully other technologies will grow and expand and get better. That's all I can wish.
Well, where there's a need, somebody's going to fill it. And if somehow Skype no longer becomes a viable option for Linux or Macs, somebody somewhere is going to fill that need. You can be assured of that. It may not happen as fast as we'd want it to, but I'm sure it's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, I hope so. Okay, we're going to jump to the next topic now. We're going to do a little bit of a soft reboot on this show. And what I mean by that is Doc is still new to Linux. He's ran it on a live CD to do data recovery and things like that, which a lot of computer techs do, actually. A lot of computer techs understand the basics of booting to a CD, going to the file browser, double clicking on the hard drive, and going to where they find the files and copy them off, and that sort of thing. So there's a really a little bit that you only need to know to do that process. You don't need to know really anything to do that process. So we're going to do a little bit of a soft reboot, and each week we're going to try to go over some of the basic intro topics, and then as time goes on, grow on to bigger and better things. The first thing I wanted to mention in reference to this is anyone at home, the home listeners, let's say, you can go to two places on the internet, and you can basically run Ubuntu 11.04 on your Windows or Mac or Linux PC, full-blown, full screen, full experience without downloading an ISO, without learning how to install the virtual machine clients, or how to do any special things. It's literally a web app.
So, Steve, let me get this straight. You're saying that users can work with this Ubuntu without installing anything on their machine or even running from a live CD?
Yeah. Now the Amazon EC2 one, I've had issues with it. I'll say that I've had issues with it since we've had that massive EC2 debacle like 3 weeks ago. It's supposed to be try-ubuntu-beta.ec42.net, which is basically directly hosted on Amazon EC2. And I'm having really issues getting that URL load. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Hopefully by the time this comes out, the issue will be fixed. But the secondary place is at edubuntu.com/weblive. Now, you probably don't have to install anything, I'll say. And the reason I say that is most users on most operating systems have Java installed. Granted, I don't think it's as popular as it once was, but I still think a lot of users have installed. And if you go to edubuntu.com/weblive, you can right there fill out some fields. They're not, there's no registration, there's no email, there's no confirmation, there's nothing required. You just go there, select Ubuntu 1104, put in whatever name you want, whatever login you want, and whatever passwords you want. These logins and passwords are only relevant inside this basically hosted virtual machine. Now, this hosted virtual machine on edubuntu.com/weblive is heavily limited. They say they can only host, I believe, 10 at a time, but I do think they have upgraded their servers. So now I think they can host more, but it's still very easy for this server to get bogged down. Don't be shocked if it takes a minute or two for it to load, or doesn't load, come back in an hour, try it again. But you don't have to really install, download, configure, tweak anything to experience everything in Ubuntu. You can literally install software. You can browse the internet. You can't mount your local USB drives that I know of, but that's an obvious limitation as far as I think. Either way, I think it's really cool. I think anyone even at all interested in dabbling in this, in any respect, you need to go check that out and try it out. It's definitely cool and fun.
Steve, let me play devil's advocate here and ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
You're basically running Ubuntu through a web application, correct?
Yes, you're using a service. The application's actually called No Machine NX, which is like VNC, Log Me In, one of those tools.
Okay, so you're hampered, for lack of a better word, with what could possibly be your first Ubuntu experience by lag time from the server getting the Linux experience to you. Having said that, do you think that this would really be a good way to introduce somebody to Ubuntu or Linux in general who has not used it before?
I think it's good if they have severe bandwidth caps, so they don't have to download a 600 plus meg download. I think that's really the prime target for this. For normal people, it might be, it might not be. The lag I experienced, to be honest, was quite minimal. To be honest, surprisingly minimal. And the clarity, the quality of the desktop that I got, the resolution and everything was, to be honest, mind-blowing. I could not believe how good this looked. And to be honest, it's another time when I should have shut my hole and just listened to Russ Winter, the techiegeek.com, on his podcast. He even said, he said months ago, and he said on his last podcast, No Machine NX has figured out all desktop resolution issues. No one displays the desktop remotely properly like No Machine. And anyone logging into this service would have to agree. I swear I get the exact same desktop resolution, full screen, seamless on my devices that I do on my native installs. And the menu reaction speed, to be honest, and launching applications was very, very close to my native install. I might have got lucky. They might have had downtime. I might have been the only person on there. So your mileage might vary. I think it's more fun than really a serious way to evaluate, I'll say.
So in other words, it's more of a gee whiz factor than it is a selling factor, correct?
To a degree, yes. Yeah, and I'm a gee whiz kind of guy.
Well, I can be too. Yeah, I like to see the gee whiz every now and again. So you say that, as far as you understand, only 10 people, and I assume this is 10 people worldwide, can actually use this at a time?
That's what it said very clearly on the site less than 3 weeks ago. They have changed the verbiage above where you log in now, and it doesn't really say that anymore. So they might have changed how much it can handle. It does say to be warned, you might experience a bit of latency. And that's, to be honest, anyone using the internet should honestly be aware, but I know a lot of people aren't. Stuff happens. I mean, once in a while you go to Google and it takes 10 seconds to load. You know, things on the internet do happen. Don't be shocked if it isn't lightning fast. But this is just I honestly like it as a disposable playground. If I want to install something and see how it works and I don't want to do it on my computer, that is the perfectly painless way that I do it now.
I see. Well, it looks like it does have its uses. Quite frankly, I would probably much prefer either trying out Linux in a virtual local machine or off of a live CD than this. But as you said, it does have sort of a really nice gee whiz factor about it.
Yeah. So anyone who wants to follow along, that's one way you can do it. You can download ISO, load it in a VM. You can boot from a live CD and play around. You can dual install. You can Wooby install. There's a whole lot of choices. But we're going to jump into some of the basics about the Ubuntu interface or the Linux interface. It's really the GNOME interface. Okay. The first real basic, Doc. Linux is essentially just the kernel of the operating system. In Windows and Mac, the layer from kernel to desktop is seamless. It's one big blob. You don't see any separations, really. It's a seamless experience. From the time you hit the power button, you know, most users have no idea. There's a bootloader. There's the kernel that gets loaded, and then all these different layers and services get loaded. And then there's Explorer.exe on Windows. That's the actual desktop display. In Linux, a lot of that is, I don't want to say optional, but you can go with so many different options on each individual layer. It's almost mind-numbing. The number of distributions, which is just a different spin of Linux, is astronomical. I believe on distrowatch.com, the last count, it's well over 600 active distributions of Linux.
And let me ask you a quick question. Linux by nature is natively a command line interface controlled operating system, isn't it?
Well, yes, and kind of no. It yes, essentially is. Back in, and the reference I'll use is back in Windows 98 SE, I believe, was the first version of Windows. They took DOS out of the equation, and they turned everything into API calls to the kernel to do things. Linux is pure command line terminal based kind of interfaces to everything, which has its advantages and disadvantages. The advantages is that means from the command line, you can do anything you can imagine. On the Windows command line, you can't do a whole lot. And it's because that command line is now actually a emulation layer. That's not a real
Mhm.
command prompt you have in Windows. Now, with that said, that means anyone can type in anything they want and create anything they want using the same basic command sets. So there's so much diversity, it's almost mind-numbing. Now, with that said, there's niche distros. There's a whole bunch of niche distros. And what I mean by that is there's distros for people who want to plug their guitar into their computer and turn it into a live mixing board and a recording studio. And that's all the distribution does. There's distributions for 2D animation. There's distributions for video editing. There's distributions to just be a network firewall. Anything you can imagine, there's a unique Linux distribution to fill that one need. Which to me is honestly the power of Linux. It's not a crippling factor. Some people say there's too much choice. I think choice is great because I, as a user, don't want to always have to load the same vanilla thing and just configure it until I get it the way I want it. I like being able to just download something pre-configured, pre-compiled to meet my needs. People on other operating systems don't really have that luxury. You always have to install something to fill your need unless you only want to play solitaire and browse the internet.
Well, Steve, let me ask you something about the difference in distributions, difference in distros. If you have become used to using a certain distro, Debian, say, and you're used to doing things the way that Debian does those things, have you noticed much difference between distributions that, for instance, the way that you might have done something in Debian would be different than the way that you would do it in Ubuntu? If you follow my question?
Yeah, I follow. Well, there's really a couple lines of distributions that you can travel. There's the Debian-based distribution. There's the RPM-based distribution. There's the Slackware, and there's the Puppy, and there's different channels you can head down. Debian is one of the fattest channels there is. There's a lot of things based off of Debian, which essentially means most of those distributions do almost everything under the hood very similar, very similar. So if you know Debian, then you can run Ubuntu and be very comfortable. You can run Linux Mint and be very comfortable. You can run Peppermint OS and be very comfortable. You can run Jolly OS, and there's really almost countless other with Debian. There are going to be little tweaks, but most of that's going to be to the GUI interface. You know, this one loaded GNOME 2.3. This one decided to go with GNOME 3, which is very visually different. But under the hood, if you really know the commands, you can still achieve the same task at the same rate of speed. Now,
so it's intuitive from distro to distro. If you get comfortable doing something under one distro, you should be able to figure out how it's done under another.
Yeah, and even from Debian to RPM, or from RPM to Puppy, a lot of the base mechanics are the same. Some of the folder structures might be a little bit different. Some of the package management systems might be different, where in most Debian-based systems, I can use aptitude or apt-get. There's actually two different things you can use to install applications from the command line. In the RPM world, you can use YAST, I know is one, YAST, and other forks have their own other ways of installing software, but it's just like verbiage. It's just like if you go from New York to California, people might use different slang, but you can still get around.
Right.
You have to figure out, oh, okay, that's what they mean.
So why should you have to use a program to install a program? Why can't you just do your installations from within the various distributions?
Okay, here's one of the biggest chasms of differences between, let me get this right, Windows pre-Windows 8 and Mac pre-Snow Leopard, I believe, is the latest one. Before the latest Mac and before Windows 7, the normal way was you downloaded something, you double-clicked it, it ran, and it installed. Okay.
Right.
Linux doesn't do that. Windows 8 will still have the option to do that, but it is going to have a built-in repository. The newest Mac has a built-in app store or a repository. The iPhone has a built-in repository or app store. The Android devices have a built-in market or repository. And BlackBerry has their BlackBerry store, which is a repository. What a repository basically is, and the program is the interface to the repository. The best way I can explain it is it's Windows Update done completely right. Windows Update can update drivers, the operating systems, and Microsoft products. If it does any other updating, it's completely news to me. And I've been kind of using computers for 30 years. In Linux, the idea is if you download your applications from this app store, it's a controlled environment, which means you're always assured of the quality of that download, number one. The security behind that download, you know you're getting it from a trusted source. And the package management system will always check those repos for updates for everything. Imagine if Windows updated your Flash, updated your Java, updated your Firefox, updated your Adobe Reader, updated any piece of software basically you could put on that computer. That would be a glorious thing. It's coming in Windows 8. Mac now is starting to have it. This has been around in Linux for decades, dare I say? Close to decades. It does have its pros and cons. The cons is not everything's in there. But I will say in the base Ubuntu install, there's over 35,000 applications, libraries, servers, services that you can install, including a whole new desktop interface from that repo. So it's a really different way of handling the installation of applications. So it's trusted, it's vetted, it's updated, it's updatable, and it's a lot of hands off. I mean, I come home from work, I boot my laptop up, you know, it says there's an update for Flash. Click here to install. Click it, put in my password, bang. I have my updates, and I don't have to worry as much about security vulnerabilities and stuff. That to me is the real key to this. It makes the maintainers of those repos much better to react to vulnerabilities. If there's a vulnerability in Flash, well, you got to wait for that stupid Flash window to pop up and say there's an update. You know, who knows how often that checks? It's, as far as I know, Adobe Blackmagic in the background. I don't know where I can even change the setting for it to check or force it to check.
So do the gatekeepers, so to speak, of these repositories pretty well guarantee that the files that you are getting from them are going to be virus and malware free?
Well, here's the thing. Only one distribution I know of does not digitally sign their packages. And that is Arch Linux. And there's a bunch of back and forth about it. A lot of the Arch users could care less if they're digitally signed, because nothing's bad's happened and they don't foresee anything bad happening. But in almost every other distribution, those packages are digitally signed, which means even if a hacker gets into that repo and replaces that package, that could do something malicious, and it is very possible for that to happen. There is malicious software out there, but the digital signing is a secure way of ensuring that when I go to click update, it's going to basically give me an error and not allow it to install.
Yeah, I think in the Windows world, digital signing means or equals the fact that what you were about to download did indeed come from the company that it says it comes from. So
Right.
does the same thing apply to the Linux repositories?
Basically, yes. I'm not completely versed on how that aspect is, but from everything I gather, it is digitally encrypted with a cert, with a
Mhm.
self-signed cert from the maintainers of the repository. And Jerry L in the chat does bring up a great point, and this is why I use Google Chrome on every operating system I run, because Google Chrome has inside of it, it maintains it itself, Flash, Java, and PDF capabilities. So I know every time I launch Google Chrome, it's going to automatically go check for updates, and then the next time I reboot Google Chrome, it's going to apply those updates. That's why, to be honest, I keep telling my customers and my friends that I care about to use Google Chrome, because I know it's quicker to upgrade, update, and it's silent. They don't have to click nothing or do nothing. So it is kind of like Google has their own repo for Chrome, and it's a self-maintaining, encapsulated package management system inside of the browser. It's just all seamless to the end user. They don't even know it exists.
Okay, well that's interesting. But it's still I still don't think you answered my question about why do we need a program to install programs? You went on to explain about repositories, and it was a good explanation. But my question really didn't get answered, or am I missing something here?
Well, the program is a gateway to access those repos. You need an application to go out to the websites, get the new package information, and if you say you want to install Firefox via that package management system, it goes to that repo, downloads Firefox, and disperses the files in all the needed places on the computer, including like the GNOME menu or the KDE menu, like the Windows Start menu. And sometimes we'll even add entries for it to auto start when your computer starts up, and even make desktop icons sparingly. Sometimes it does.
Okay.
So,
Interesting.
and here's the gimmick. On Windows, when you double click an exe file, you're not actually running that exe file. You're actually running the Windows in installer 3.1 most of the time. So Windows does it. It's just you don't even know it's happening, because whenever you install something, the Windows installer picks it up and then carries the torch for it, adds the entries in the add, remove programs and such. And you can kind of do the same thing with Linux. If you are in Ubuntu and you double click a .deb for Debian file, it will automatically run the gdebi interface to install the package, where a simple window pops up and you click install, it asks for your password and it says installing, done. So it kind of actually works the same way. It's just more customizable, more controllable in the Linux world about needing an application to install an application.
So you think it's more user-friendly than the Windows installer system?
Not as friendly. I'd say more customizable. And Windows is going this way too. In Windows 8, there's going to be a built-in App Store, or whatever they're going to call it, because they can't call it App Store because they'll get sued. But they're going to have their own area where you can go browse, download, and install applications with seemingly one click. So I think it's a good enough idea that everyone else is finally catching on. And to be honest, in the Linux world, this happens a lot. Linux starts something, they might not get it perfect, but they start an idea and it blossoms, and then years and years later, the big boys, quote unquote, pick it up, run with it. And then a lot of people don't realize, this technology has been around a very long time, very, very long time. Now all of a sudden it's new again, like Apple with iPods. They didn't invent an MP3 player. They marketed it marvelously,
How much cross-pollination do you think there is between the different Linux developers, particularly on the kernel level, to get a change in their system out in terms of them coming out at the same time? Does there seem to be, uh, as I said, cross-pollination or collaboration between the developers of the different kernels and therefore the different distributions?
I honestly I don't think people think there's enough of that going on. A lot of it is, okay, we're going to huddle up, we're going to do what we want to do. We rely on GNOME. Whenever we launch, just get the newest GNOME and we're just going to package that.
I
And then
see.
2 weeks
I see.
later, there might be a brand new GNOME. So it doesn't happen enough, I think. But the beautiful thing is there are people making strides. There is a Debian group now assigned to only work with other distributions that are basing themselves off of Debian to help create better communication and to make sure code gets properly sent back downstream and upstream in a quick manner.
In the
So there
true
are steps.
in the true sense of the open source credo and movement, correct?
Yes, exactly. Give a like, share a like, freedom is power. And they want to try to make sure it's an effective causeway of communication, let's say. And real quick, Tracy Holtz reminded me, the best thing about the Linux repository system is, for instance, if you download VirtualBox on Windows, I believe the last time I downloaded it was 80 megabytes. On Linux, the last time I downloaded it, it was 20 megabytes. And it's not because it's super slick and streamlined. No. Linux also has applications and application structures compartmentalized. One of the philosophies behind Linux and Unix is make one application that does one thing and make it work great. Because of that, when I download, let's say, an audio player, that audio player is really most of the time just the GUI interface and the playlist control mechanism. The backbone of how that audio player plays audio is handled by something else. These are called dependencies in the Linux world. In the Windows world, there's no such thing as dependencies because typically maintainers of an application take all the dependencies that that application needs and it puts it in one package. So most of the time, the Windows installers are bigger than the Linux installers. I know for the GIMP, the installer on my Linux box, I want to say was less than 3 megs, 4 megs, but it has a lot of dependencies in the background. The plus to that is the more applications you install, as long as you stick with the same basic branch of GNOME or KDE or LXD kind of thing, your downloads are going to be really quick and tiny and small because you already satisfied most of those dependencies with other applications installed on your computer. So in the end, you'll actually use less disk space with the same amount of programs installed.
So as you used GIMP as an example just a moment ago, I guess the GTK package that GIMP is dependent on is a package of these dependencies. And that's why the actual GIMP download itself is so small.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the best way I can explain it, it's kind of like Legos, the Lego system where you have the little blocks. In Linux, you can take one of those blocks apart, examine it, and you know exactly what it does, how it works, why it's there. In Windows, you just get a whole pack of Legos that are already built together, and you don't need to know anything that's going on in there. Just install it. Just go install it.
That's an excellent way to explain it. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, now the first app I wanted to jump on, Doc, it's actually not new, but it's new to me. And I love Discovery. A guy honestly asked me what I thought of this application, to which I had to respond, I have no idea. So I had to download it and play with it. It's called Deja Dupe. DEJA space DUP. Deja Dupe.
Dupe as in duplication?
Exactly. This is a quote unquote simple backup tool. It hides the complexity of backing up the right way in encrypted, offsite, and regular. It uses the backend called duplicity, which I found out a lot of backup tools look like they rely on. So it's a thing that's been around a while, trusted. It works very well. DageDupe is a front end to this, and what it does that I really like, you can schedule automatic backups locally, remotely via FTP, remotely to Amazon EC3, remotely to other servers. Automatically, seamless, you don't got to touch nothing. And the only backup that works is the one where the users don't have to start it up. So I like that. The other thing I like is this can do encrypted backup, so you can back up stuff to your Dropbox, because as we all just found out, Dropbox is very secure. So you can do that automatically. And the other huge plus I think about this tool that really tickles my fancy is it can do incremental and differential backups. Really only business people need to know what that means, or actually know what that means. All it means is if you have a full alphabet over here and you back up, so you have A through Z, tomorrow you add the number 1. When that next backup runs, it's not going to back up A through Z and the number 1, because that's a waste of space. It's just going to say, here's the differential for that. So it's that plus the number 1. It makes the size of your backup so much smaller, so much quicker. I really like it when it's done right. And everything I can tell about this tool tells me it's done right.
And so does this do your backups automatically in terms of deciding whether it should do a incremental or a differential backup?
You can set it up how you want, but the default, which I like, is it just says, okay, if you do once a week, it's just going to do a full backup once a week. It guides you through a wizard that makes it pretty easy. If you go into advanced, that's where you can say, okay, now do differential backups and stuff like that. So if you just need something really easy, really quick, and have it automatically scheduled so you don't have to think about it, I honestly think this is a really good tool to hop on. And the website is launchpad.net/DEJA/-DUP.
And we'll have this in the show notes too when this comes out.
Absolutely, yeah. Try to keep up on those show notes. I think I'm doing decent. Not gonna say I'm doing great, but I'm doing decent. Okay, now this next thing, Doc, I honestly think is going to tickle your fancy.
Well, it's been a while since my fancy has been tickled. Go ahead.
Well, I'll do my best, even though we're at a distance. I know, being an educator that cares about education, knowledge is cool. In the Windows world, it's not always easy to learn about stuff because not a lot of people are openly talking about it in public forums and recording it and tweaking how they talk about it and do a better job at it and, make it shareable. Most of the Windows stuff I learned was trial and error or Googling and reading text of it. Sometimes we don't want text. Sometimes video is better. And I can tell you, I learn so much better by video. There's 3 links I actually have. The first one is to Scale 9X. Scale stands for Southern California something Linux something. Oh, Southern California Linux Expo. Okay, this was a Linux conference that just happened, I want to say 3 months ago or so. And what they did on this website, SoCalLinuxExpo.org, is they basically took every single talk given at this conference and they recorded the video, and they also have slides because every presenter uses some sort of slide presentation. It's just, natural. It's peanut butter and jelly. They go hand in hand. So they also have the slides for this. This is just one example of where you can go and learn. I don't want to say about Linux, but you can learn about the community and the software about Linux. Not about Linux per se, but like how to do a podcast using Linux, building free software groups, PCBSD, the easy open source desktop, writing GIMP scripts and plugins, Membase, OpenShot. Learn how to really take advantage of the applications that are in Linux and take advantage of the community aspect of Linux. The one guy I know who was at this, who actually talked, his name is Larry Bushy, host of the Going Linux podcast, which is one of those podcasts. If you've never used Linux before, or you've been using Linux since the early 90s, I encourage anyone to listen to this podcast. Larry and Tom talk in such a clear way about everything. They make it very easy to understand. To be honest, I kind of try to shoot for their clarity when they talk. But this is the first content, and there's little doubt in my mind this is 20 plus hours worth of video. You can go download and watch at your leisure, and most of it links to stuff like Ustream postings of it, which is fine. It's basically the conference put a camcorder in the back of the room. They have a mic at the podium, and they record the video and audio, and they just put it up for anybody to view. I think this is the good example of the open mentality of Linux. Okay, the next one is actually at another conference called FalseDem, video.falsedem.org, FOSDEM. Now this one, Doc, every video from this conference in 2011, 2010, 2009, 2008, 2007, 2006, and 2005 that they were able to basically they put on this website for people to freely download. Now, for instance, you go back to 2005, there's only like 10 videos. There might have only been 10 talks back then. But if you go up to 2011, let's just say there's a lot more talks there. Most of these are in AVI format. Again, many hours of entertainment to me, and learning, I think, to a lot of other people. And this is just another example of giving, sharing what we know you should know too kind of mentality. And the last one is at the TexasLinuxFest.org. They basically took their entire, Saturday session, where it might have only been a one-day event. I'm not positive, but you can basically go there and look at, they had like 20 or so different seminars, like where you can go and you can get the PDF and the MP3 from the talk. Again, I would encourage anyone basically to just go look at all these, and you might find a topic that maybe you wanted to get into. Like, maybe I want to start doing game development. Maybe I want to start doing more professional Word document stuff. Maybe I want to start doing video editing. These are perfectly good free ways where you can go and basically learn from someone who's good at it. This is almost too much information. The only words that come to my mind, Doc, is information and content overload.
So is there anything at these presentations that would interest the newbie, or is it for the experienced Linux user?
To be honest, everything I looked at, to me, said it was a good mishmash of expert things like how to configure network firewalls the best, and then like a basic introductory to open shot video editing. They really, in my eyes, these Linux Fest organizers do a great job of not being too heavily focused one way or the other. They try to get a good blend of all different levels and different topics. And to be honest, sometimes I need those beginner ones.
So have you ever been to one of these gatherings of the faithful yourself?
No, Doc, and I'm almost embarrassed, but I will say, if I have to, I don't want to say quit my job. If I have to run over a coworker, I'll say, because that might be a little happier, I am going to the Ohio Linux Fest this year, September 9th, 10th, and 11th. It's one of the bigger ones. Now, I say that there's a couple big ones. Scale seems pretty big. Southeast Linux Fest seems very big. Texas Linux Fest seems really big and popular. Everything in Texas is bigger, you know, but the Ohio Linux Fest, to be honest, is the closest physically to me that I already know people are going to. So, you know, I really do honestly think I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to learn. I'm going to see people I only, you know, talk to over the internet, or I only seen on the internet kind of thing, and learn Linux, learn stuff I don't know about software packages, have interesting talks with people, because I know that's one of the big things is BAFOs, I believe they're called, which is birds of a feather. Waffle, something like that, where basically a group out of nowhere, unplanned, gathers in a hallway and they start talking about a topic. And then you, as a walker by, you hear, whoa, did he just say SSH? Well, let me go see what they're saying. And then basically you just stand there and you listen to two people talk about how they do something. You know what I mean? And then if you know about it, you can say, well, I do it like this. Is that not right? You know, and it basically turns into an instantaneous lug, a Linux users group where people talk about how they do things, why they think this is better than that, what's the benefit to doing it this way, what's the downfall of doing it that way, and you just basically share and learn. So I am going to the Ohio Linux Fest, unless December 12th, 2012 comes early.
Let's hope not.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's hope not.
Okay.
Yeah, what you just said about, you know, people talking in the hallways and, you know, you picking up on it and learning stuff. That's what happens in the podnutz TeamSpeak chat room. You know, you don't even have to talk yourself, just listen. And different times a day, there will be, you know, a lot of guys in there. And I've learned a lot just from listening to them talk. And you jump in, you ask your question, and, you know, you learn an awful lot that way. That's what those hallway groups that you just mentioned sound a lot like. Yeah, I'm thinking about going up to that Ohio Fest myself.
Very cool. Very cool. It's from everything I know from people who went in the past and everybody I know who's going this year, it's going to be a good time. And I'll say what I honestly believe. This might be a pipe dream. It might be, I don't know. I might have a gas leak in the house. But this is what from everything I gather, I believe the huge majority of people that go to these conferences have similar reality levels, I'll say. I know I don't know everything. I know that. I just know what my experiences tell me from everything I see. You know what I mean? A lot of people who I hear who go to these conferences and have a good time in these conferences seem like the same kind of mentality. You know, they're open to ideas and thoughts. You know, they're not there to go and slam their fist on the desk and pronounce this as being that and this is the only way kind of thing. And that's just like the podnutz TeamSpeak, just like you said. It's just a bunch of guys relaxing, and then somebody will, you know, pop up and say, I'm having this issue with this laptop. And people don't hop in and say, well, this is it, and that's it, and that's it, and that's it. No, we just say, well, maybe it could be this. And we just throw things out there. To be honest, the same kind of mentality exists in the Linux Basics online lug, which is the other show I do on Friday evenings. Right before that, we have an online lug where instead of using TeamSpeak, we use Mumble. Another story where we basically just have a bunch of guys show up and we basically just ask random questions about Linux, tell random stories about things that we've witnessed. And then once in a while, you know, I'll talk about eating mac and cheese with hot dogs in it or something. You know, it's very, very free form, and anyone can come in and ask a question just like the Podnutz team speak. And there's no doubt in that Ohio Linux Fest, if you have a question, all you got to do is know one person there and say, well, I have a question. And that one person will probably say, I think I know who can help. Well, let's go ask Bob. You know, Bob will say, I'm not sure, but I think Tracy can help us. And it really is a bunch of nice people there to just learn, share, and have fun.
Sounds like fun. Sounds like fun. Speaking of learning, I need you to teach me something. There's GNOME and there's Wine, and they are, to my understanding, Windows emulators within Linux, correct?
Well, Wine stands for Wine is not a emulator. Think of GNOME as like your desktop presentation layer on Windows. It's just an interactive layer. It really has nothing to do with Windows applications. But
I see.
Wine is really sneakily trickly to explain because it's really, I think, kind of hard to explain. But here's the way I say it. Wine is a layer that can take Windows procedure calls, API calls, and instructions from a Windows executable file. It can transform them into Linux kernel API calls and command sets. And then it takes the return result set back from that and retransforms it back into the Windows equivalent. So essentially, you can run Windows applications seamlessly inside of Linux. It doesn't work for every application, but in the last year, I can tell you they have skyrocketed on how good Wine works with applications and the number of applications.
Okay, so the other one, GNOME, you say is a desktop emulator, correct?
Oh, it's a desktop layer, I would say.
Layer, excuse me. So the latest and greatest, or trying to be the greatest, is Unity. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is Unity the desktop layer to the latest flavor of Ubuntu?
Yep, and it's short for unification, they say. I don't know, where they're trying to unify other desktop technologies into this one interface. Unity is just another layer of how you can interact with files, folders, programs, and hardware devices. It's everything you click, you know, it has to go through Unity. Everything you see that's not a command prompt when you're running Ubuntu 11.04 is Unity. So it's really, it does play an important role, but it's one of those things, the better it is, the less you should really know it exists. That's how I think of it.
Well, from what I've understood, from what I've read in various chats and blog postings, apparently Unity is not doing that good a job of it. Some people have often said that it was really not ready for prime time. It doesn't work as well as it should. What's your take on that, Steve?
Well, I'll first say it isn't supposed to be 100% ready, primed, ready to go. And here's the reason behind. Every 2 years, Ubuntu puts out what they call a long-term support, or LTS edition or version. The last one was 10.04, which in Ubuntu terms, first digits year, second digits month. So 10.04, 2010, April. That's the last long-term support release. Now that release will have desktop support for 2 years. That server version will have support for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Every 6 months, Ubuntu releases a new version. The versions between those long-term support releases, I don't want to call dev releases. I don't want to call testing releases. They're kind of like beta releases, but in the past, I think Ubuntu, to be honest, has done too good of a job to where those every 6-month releases were pretty stable and pretty good because they haven't made huge jumps like this to change the complete desktop interface. It's really not supposed to be ready for prime time. What it is supposed to be is it's supposed to work. It's not supposed to crash. It's not the final implementation of it, and it's not supposed to be the final implementation of it. And Tracy is correcting me. The desktop support for the long-term support is 3 years, and the server support is 5 years. So I had that mistaken. Those are the versions. To be honest, if you really desire the most stability you can get, then you should go download Ubuntu 10.04. It's actually 10.04.2 because it's been revved. That's the one you really should download and install if you want the most stable experience you can possibly get. If you're a bleeding edge guy, then go ahead and get 11.04 and cross your fingers.
Well, so suppose you want to be a bleeding edge guy and you want to work with Ubuntu 11.4. You got anything that can make life with Unity a little bit better?
Well, there's a couple things out there that I found, and this is why I think Ubuntu is so successful. It isn't Ubuntu. Ubuntu is Debian, and only I think 6% of the whole thing is modified. So it isn't like Ubuntu is this, huge difference between Debian. I think the part that makes Ubuntu good is the amount of people that come out with little things that help make it a better experience. And if you go to lifehacker.com, which I know the URLs are super silly there, learn all Ubuntu 11.04's keyboard shortcuts with this handy wallpaper. Because this is a completely brand new desktop interface, a lot of the keyboard shortcuts are going to be completely new to people. Some of them are not instinctive, I'll say, but in a full-featured desktop, it's supposed to be a little complex. With versatility comes complexity. These are very versatile desktops, so there's going to be a little bit more stuff. But then this sheet will at least make it easier to just look at your desktop and see how you can speed up your efficiency with certain quick tasks.
That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, and the second one, to be honest, I've gotten really good feedback from people. And this one's at omgubuntu.co.uk, which I gotta say, they have a lot of really good stuff on their website. Most of the time, when they describe something, they do it in good steps, and that's what I really like. I like to be able to see something well stepped out, and they have good descriptions, good examples, things are clear, so I can tell other people to go and look at it. This link, though, is at omgubuntu.co.uk/natty, Natty. This is what they call their complete guide to 11.04. And what I mean by that is they have a large amount of videos that go through a lot of the finer points and the basic usability. They actually cross that chasm pretty cleanly, I gotta say, of talking about the basics, and then here's how you do something advanced and cool. What it is, what the launcher is, how it works, what is the dash and how that works, how do you access and how do you install software and what the panel is and how to take advantage of it. If you're completely new to Unity, which everybody kind of is, this I think is a good place to go if you really want to know some of the ins and outs. And this is not put on by Ubuntu. Mark Shuttleworth, the guy behind Ubuntu, didn't pay a dime to anybody that I know of to do this. This is just a community coming out and saying, I want to help people use this better. You know, and that's really why I think Ubuntu is where it's at.
Yeah, this is a very well done website. I mean, this is not just a fanboy site we're looking at here. This is very well put together.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really kind of impressed at how well that site pulls off the task of just, you know, pulling information in, sharing it, making it easily comprehensible and in a professional manner. I mean, it's obviously like a blog format content management system, but they did good.
This looks like a real good go-to site for everything Ubuntu, not just 11.4.
Yeah, there's a couple sites out there that I think like the cream always rises to the top. This is one of like the 4 or 5, I think, for new users to just go out, learn, you know, some basics. And real quick, next thing I'm going to just throw in here real quick is Mark Shuttleworth made an announcement less than 2 weeks ago, I want to say. And what he is doing is he's setting the goals kind of high, in my opinion. He basically came out and said his goal is, I believe he said in the next 4 years. Yeah. In the next 4 years to have 200 million users using Ubuntu.
And what do you think the user base is now? Any stats on that?
Here's the thing. It's a little difficult to give accurate counts on this information. And the reason being is it's not DRM'd and it's not heavily controlled central points where you can only download this from. The true legality is I can at any time download the ISO, make a physical copy, go wherever I want, and hand them out like free cheese, and it's legal. And so because of that, it's really hard to do the actual counts. I'm not going to guess, to be honest. I know DistroWatch has some numbers, and I want to say that's the best. That's the best I think right now we have is going by the DistroWatch numbers. No matter what the DistroWatch numbers is, there is no way he's even close to 200 million. That to me is a very, bold thing to say. And he's made it clear in the past, I can say, very, very, very clear in the past. Ubuntu was created with the goal of being self-sufficient to where he is a millionaire and he doesn't want to keep pouring money into this. He wants to start something that becomes self-sufficient, makes enough money to keep running and expanding and getting better, leveraging the Linux kernel, GNU tools, and that kind of thing. So I just want to throw it out there. This guy does not really care how many people sit in their basement and try to load this on a computer. He wants to make this a prime time thing.
Well, I don't see why he couldn't reach at least half of that number in that time period. I mean, but again, how are you going to be able to prove the numbers?
Yeah. Tracy Holt says Ubuntu right now says they have 20 million users worldwide. So that's 100% increase. I don't think Unity's a great start to that, but you know, that's just a little personal opinion and interjected in there. Good luck, Mark. Good luck. Okay. The next thing I wanted to jump on really quick is a complete change of topic, Doc, but I wanted to talk about this. Monta Vista it's a company not too many of us has probably heard of. They're actually a pretty big enterprise backup restoration solution. And they announced that they are going to basically take their bare metal engine, which I believe it's actually the last version. It's like version 6, I want to say. And they're going to basically give it away completely for free. I know nothing about this product, but it is a successful company basically now going to just release their software out there. So I am really encouraged to see where this goes. I think this is going to actually become something better than Monta Vista ever experienced. I think it's going to be used more than I think they guessed about. And to be honest, I think it's going to help their business in the end. I think it's going to make them a more well-known, more popular, more credible company. So
I must say I've never heard of them, so I'll take a look at this later and see what they're all about.
Yeah, I've never honestly heard of them before, but they run a lot of embedded Linux systems, which to the network domain admin doesn't mean a lot, but what it really means is you can put a device on your network. You don't have to do anything to it. You know, you go in one time through a web GUI, probably set up your pass and your options, and then the embedded Linux then takes over and does everything on its own without you ever having to do anything. The company has been growing a lot, I can say, since 1999. So I'm just really interested to see if this software actually takes off for anyone. I have hopes for it, I'll say.
Yeah, we can wish them the best, see what happens.
Yep. Okay. The next thing I honestly wanted to talk about real quick is something called Raspberry Pi.
I've heard about this. This is so cool.
And I'll say, I'm not a really big fan of raspberries. They're kind of tart. But this, Doc, I want one so bad. This is like, if anyone wanted to like tease me, it's very easy to do. All you need is a gadget. All you need is a gadget that's small and cool. And I just got to say, it's only $25, 700 megahertz, 128 megs of RAM, 2 USB ports, a micro SD card reader, 1080p HDMI video out, and it runs Ubuntu 9.04, and it's the size of a thumb drive. So I could have a shoebox. I could have a shoebox that could be a cluster, like a supercomputer, in my house that probably uses less energy than this monitor on my laptop. I just think this is cool. It's really in like a beta stage, but I like the possibilities where this could mean computers could be in 3 years kind of thing.
And if you look at the picture on the website, you can get an idea of how big it truly is, because just to the right of it is a USB connector. And it's not really big at all. Like you say, it looks like it could almost fit inside a thumb drive.
Yeah. Yeah. And as other operating systems continuously need more and more and more hardware, power, oomph, you know, Linux seems to be needing less and less. So I just wanted to bring that up just as my little cool gadget thing. Okay, Doc, I know we're going long. It's a nasty habit I'm really trying to break. Steve's always been very nice to me when I get along. So I'm sorry.
Oh, you don't have to apologize to me. You want to move on to some emails, or have you got something else that you want to share with us?
Yeah, let's hop on those emails.
Okay. The first one that I've got comes from Ma88IFY, making a comment on episode 42. He was talking about Unity as well. He said, in terms of the stability of it, he said, you have to install the drivers to use Unity. He goes on to say, run additional drivers and it will work after you install, and after you install the drivers, you restart. However, Unity is very buggy. Check out my newest YouTube video called Ubuntu Unity Sucks to Be You. This video will show you some of the bugs I have, and that's a YouTube video called Ubuntu Unity Sucks to Be You. I guess we'll have a link to that on the show notes as well. Any comments on the driver issue there, Steve?
Well, oh yeah, I'll just add the one thing that he says in there that not a lot of Windows users might pick up on is there's really only two reasons you ever have to close down your applications and either log out and log back in or reboot your computer. There's only two reasons ever: a kernel upgrade or a video driver upgrade. You can, most of the time I've been able to log out and log back in, and my what's called X session has been reset to where the new video driver loads. The kernel upgrade, without there's a piece of software out there that I can never remember that you can actually do in-place kernel upgrades without rebooting. Not a lot of operating systems or not a lot of distros support that, but it is out there. But right now on regular Ubuntu, kernel upgrade requires a reboot, and that's it. It isn't like other software where sometimes you install a program that can read a certain type of doc file and you have to reboot. So it is one of those things that you rarely have to reboot, but with video drivers you do. Unity is really only right now geared towards higher end 3D enableable. You know what I mean? Video cards. So it's really one of those things that I honestly only encourage people to play with. Don't install this on your production system, or you might have pain and suffering, like our emailer.
Okay. Next email comes from Tim Chase, and he says he's about 2 weeks behind the current episodes. So he's making a comment on episode 40. And he goes on to say, in episode 40, you sounded a bit confused about the relationship between VI, Vim, and GVim, which are Nix-based text editors. VI was originally created by Billjoy for Unix. Several clones sprung up with enhancements, including NVI, Stevie, Vim, and others. Vim is VI improved and is a superset of the original VI. GVim is a build of Vim with additional GUI functionality included, such as menus, toolbars, icons in the gutters, font selection, etc. On most systems, VI, Vim, and GVim are all symlinked or hard-linked to the same binary, and it behaves according to the name by which you run it. I use VI, Vim, GVim because it's available on just about every Nix system, including Linux, BSD, Mac OS X. It's included on these by default and easy to install on Win32. I don't have to learn a different, let alone underpowered editor for each platform. It's well worth one's time to develop a passing skill with VI in case of an editing emergency, and a wise investment of time to deeply learn a powerful editor like VI, Vim, or Emacs. And that was from Tim Chase.
Gotcha. And now, really quick, Doc. Okay. Linux is so heavily influenced by the command line. You know, it has so much power, so much stuff it can do. Scripting is really popular in Linux. And when he says Nix world, what he means is Unix, Linux, BSD, Haiku, and there's like one or two more out there. They're all kind of similar-esque to where the command line and scripting is really powerful. Now, think of any text editor that, you know, the normal user sees in their average day. And I'll say That's like Ralph Macchio 1980 movie The Karate Kid. Okay. Now VI or Vim is like Bruce Lee doubled. It is so unbelievably powerful and versatile what you can do in that text editor. Most normal people can't even, to be honest, comprehend of some of the things you can do in there, much less understand the command sets to open a file or to save a file or to exit the application. It's not really super easy to do. I really honestly thank him for this email because I am not a scripting maven or genius. I'm not heavily into scripting right now. I thank him for helping me understand differences between VI and Vim. I knew a little bit, but obviously I didn't have it completely right. So I definitely want to thank Tim for that.
Okay, our next email comes from Eric, and he sends us a link, and we'll have the link in the show notes. But it makes a important point about Linux has had a major power regression as far as mobile use goes. And the link goes to a website called, looks like Phoronix.com. And I'll just read part of the first paragraph to give you the gist of what this article says. For those that follow my personal Twitter feed, will know that for the past week, I've been closely testing Ubuntu 11.04 and all Ubuntu releases going back to Ubuntu 8.04 on many mobile devices in the office. The overall system performance, power consumption, and boot performance have been the principal targets. However, late this week, I discovered a glaring regression. Ubuntu 11.04 is viciously going through power. Compared to Ubuntu 10.10, the power consumption on Ubuntu 11.04 for mobile devices is up about 10% on average, but under some workloads, I am seeing the power consumption up by nearly 30%. This is happening on many mobile systems spanning multiple generations of Intel CPUs with Intel ATI NVIDIA graphics. This issue has been tracked down to a frightening kernel regression in the machine tree that is still not addressed. And then the rest of the article goes on in a more technical manner with charts and paragraphs and whatnot. So it seems like what the author of this article is saying is that Ubuntu 11.04 uses far more power than previous versions of Ubuntu. What do you have to say about that, Steve? Have you noticed anything like this?
I don't, but I don't really run it mobily. I made up another word. I run it on devices that I honestly have plugged up all the time. My laptop I don't take out and around it about town kind of thing. I'll say it wouldn't shock me, again, this is not a long-term release, but I'll also add, a lot of people I've heard in the last couple months say Phoronix has gone click crazy. They will almost say anything to get clicks. I don't know how true that statement is. I know historically, everything they've said, they've backed up with real stats kind of thing, and it looks like the same kind of thing. So I kind of believe this, and I'll say Ubuntu 11.04 isn't a long-term support, so maybe it just wasn't, they didn't have time to tweak it. They didn't meet the deadline. Either way, if you're running it on a true mobile device, be warned, pay attention. If you do run it on a mobile device and you do see your battery charge not lasting as long, please shoot me an email, door-to-door-geek@podnutz.com. I don't know. I trust Phoronix, to be honest. Most of the time, they have really good information, and I love their Phoronix Test Suite Live CD DVD, which is a Linux distro, where you can stress test hardware and stuff. So I really like them. I kind of believe what they say here, but at the same token, I don't want to say I don't care personally, but I don't run any mobile devices, so it doesn't affect me personally, but I wanted to make sure people out there knew about this. So I really want to thank Eric for this email.
Well, I think if anybody's interested in this, they should probably do some research and see if any other websites are reporting on this. If this is true, this is pretty interesting, and it sounds like something that the developers might need to get a handle on sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and it might be a kernel thing. Maybe just the base kernel they got from the Linux Foundation needs to be tweaked. I don't know. If you're really, I'll say, if you're really stressed about battery life, I keep hearing OpenSUSE 11.4 is their version number. I want to say OpenSUSE, which is an RPM-based distribution. I keep hearing everybody telling me, and the two guys at work run it and love it, that when they load it to their laptop, they almost never hear their fan go crazy, and they see much better battery life than they saw in previous distributions and different things they ran. So if that is really important to you, battery life, check out OpenSUSE. And it's SUSE, pronounced SUSE, but it looks like Susie.
Yeah, I always thought it was Susie too.
Same here, but the guys at work correct me very politely every time.
Yeah, here's our last email, Dor. It comes from Jim, and he wants to know, first of all, he says, love your information. Do you have a good novice reference for me to set up a Squid server? I heard you talk about, heard you and Steve C talk about, I have a slow, and that's the way he wrote it, slow internet connection. There's no cable or DSL in my area. The thought of caching updates and common websites might help me. Thanks, Jim in Arizona.
Gotcha. I want to thank Jim for this email. Now, I'll first say I'm not extremely proficient in Squid. I know what it does. I actually did install it in my old house, and I had my Finera router as a second router going to it, and I saw the same MAC address always connecting to it and going to unsavory sites. So I made the Squid server take every image and flip it upside down. And that MAC address stopped connecting to my router. But Squid is a very powerful caching tool. The best example I can give to it is 3 people in your family go to Facebook a lot. The Squid server can cache a lot of the images that are repetitiously served from the web server. So the Facebook logo, people's profile pictures, even advertisements can be cached on that local server, thus not using your internet bandwidth and giving the appearance of a faster internet. Okay. What I gave Jim is basically, I heavily encourage him not to load a new distribution and then go install Squid and try to configure it himself. I really honestly do not suggest that. If you're new to Linux, doing that kind of a task will become overwhelming very, very, very quick. And I was able to point him to a tutorial at visolve.com to just make sure he knew how complicated this can be. This is quite a long tutorial with very many steps that I think is definitely too cumbersome for a new user to try to overcome. What I actually encouraged him to do was to download a pre-configured, pre-compiled, ready to roll VMware A appliance. Okay, best way I can explain this to new users is, imagine, if you will, you want to have basically just this one computer do this one specific task. In the Windows world, this would be breaking the law, but taking an image of that computer and then shrinking it down and compressing it and putting on the internet and letting other people download that image so they don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
The Linux world, this is almost expected. And what a lot of people have been doing is taking virtual machines, creating virtual machines. The biggest plus to virtual machines is if I'm running VMware and you're running VMware, Doc, we know it's the same virtualized hardware. So I can take my virtual machine, send it to you, and we don't have to worry about hardware conflicts. To me, that's gold. That's one of the best things about this system.
Mm-hmm.
So people create VMs on their computer, configure it, tweak it, get it how they want to work, and then they upload it to the VMware a appliance store, it's called. That would be the quickest, most simplest, cut to the chase way of how he can get this up and running with little issue, I'll say. And there is a couple Squid specific appliances that you can download completely free of charge, mostly configured and ready to roll. Most of them I looked at did have very usable web interfaces where you would basically take the box, load the VMware application, load this VM up, stick it in a hole, then access that box via the VMware's IP address through your browser, and then you can configure it there to cache Facebook. Don't let people on, Facebook after 9 p.m. because it's bedtime. You can do a lot of that kind of thing with Squid also. To me, that's the best, simplest, quickest, fastest, most painless way he can get this up and running. And there are other tools that can be used. The two I want to point out real quick is called Zentyal, Zentyal, and ClearOS. These are two ultra polished and powerful downloadable server operating systems that are really heavily polished, and they're really intended for small businesses. But you as a home can treat your home network like a small business and use these tools to accomplish the same kind of task. But if all he needs is Squid, VMware Appliance is where it's at.
Okay. Well, you got anything to wrap up tonight's show with, Steve?
Well, first off, Doc, I just want to say I want to thank you very much for your time and for helping out here. I honestly really expect you and me to both learn as we do this. I don't know everything. The questions you ask, I'm going to do my best to answer right away. Don't be shocked if I come back the next week and say, I gave you this answer. I should have put it like this, because I'm not right about everything. I don't know everything. I just hope that I can make the possibility of running Linux a little bit more enjoyable.
Spoken like a true educator. Well, I think that's about it for this week. We won't be on next week because you'll be on vacation, right? That's cool. I'm going to Ocean City, Maryland, and I'm going to be eating Thrasher French fries, getting sunburned, and being with my kids on the beach. Do you like vinegar with your Thrashers?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Good stuff. So we'll be back in 2 weeks, and we hope you've enjoyed the first episode of the new Linux for the rest of us. We'll still keep the episode numbers running as they are. This was episode 43. We're glad you joined us tonight, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Good night, everybody.